Today on Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat, FS boating editor George LaBonte meets with the owner of a 23-foot Regulator as it's readied for the addition of an engine bracket.
As Florida Sportsman's boating editor, I felt this was a chance to really learn some valuable information about the before and after analysis and, get some numbers that I could actually tell people about at the end of the day.
And George LaBonte sits down with Brian O'Donnell, owner of Marine Customs Unlimited, to revisit some of the most memorable builds and restorations from this season of Project Dreamboat.
Over the past few seasons on Project Dreamboat, I've seen, and you've seen, a bunch of traditional well transom to bracket conversions. Now, I've seen them even before I was involved with this show, but I've never had the opportunity to do actual hard analysis of the before and after conversion and compare the numbers and see just exactly what you've got to lose or gain if you do a conversion such as this. Now, this season, I was contacted by Scott Antonius. Scott has a Regulator with a traditional well-style transom, and he's about to do a conversion from that style to an Armstrong bracket on his boat. Outside of the show entirely, Scott contacted us as a fan of the show and a reader of the magazine and said, you might like to compare before and after on my boat, and I'd offer the boat to you and we can look at the numbers and go from there. As Florida Sportsman's boating editor, I felt this was a chance to really learn some valuable information about the before and after analysis and get some numbers that I could actually tell people about at the end of the day. Now, the way we got our results was very simple. We ran a series of tests and took a baseline average of the numbers that we got. We started out with time to plane Holeshot. Now, this wasn't very scientific. Basically, in a nutshell, we started the boat going with the tide with the trim tabs all the way up and tried to get on plane as quickly as we possibly could. Now, by going directly to sunset right away, this boat was able to plane in just over 7 seconds. Now, our next test was what speed was going to be necessary to keep the boat on plane. In other words, as I throttled back, at what point would the boat fall off a plane and want to squat? What we found was the little Regulator needed a speed of just over about 23.5 miles an hour to stay on plane. This was both motors running at 2,900 RPMs and burning just under 14 gallons an hour. Now, the number that most people are really concerned with is how fast is this boat going to go and what kind of fuel numbers are you going to get to? So we decided we would test it at 3 very common ranges to run. We're going to test the boat at 3,500 RPMs, 4,000 RPMs, and 4,500 RPMs. This would be the most common scenario for speed that you would run offshore while you're underway. Now, sitting squarely in the middle of these 3 numbers, we found 4,000 RPMs to be probably the most comfortable range to cruise at, offering us just under 37 miles an hour cruise speed at 1.37 miles per gallon. Now, a few other numbers that we wanted to look at was really just a matter of something that I'm going to say is probably subjective. Okay, I wanted to see how the boat felt, how it handled underway in various conditions, a fishing scenario, at the dock, at the boat ramp. How did the boat perform overall in kind of an intangible way, something that you just have to know inside of you, okay? So we tried a few different tests. We ran the boat. We ran the boat and maneuvered around. We tried to do figure eights in the boat. We cut around buoys in the boat. I would say on a whole, this boat ran pretty good before the conversion. One thing I did notice was that the engines did get underwater when we started, but in the big picture, the boat really handled maneuverability-wise and everything. It didn't have very many bad habits. It felt pretty good. After I got done this morning with Scott and the boat, I took plenty of notes and sent Scott on his way. Now, he left with the boat to get the bracket installed, and I went to set about crunching the numbers in my own head.
When we return, FS boating editor George LaBonte retests the performance of the 23-foot Regulator after the installation of an engine bracket. This segment brought to you by Power Pole. Swift, silent, secure. back to Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat. Join us as FS boating editor George LaBonte puts the 23-foot Regulator to the test with a new engine bracket installed on the transom.
A few weeks passed and Scott called me up informing me that the job was finished and he was ready to put the boat in the water and let us see how it was going to perform with the new bracket. We met Scott at the boat ramp in Port Salerno, and one of the first things I noticed about this boat was it looked a lot cooler with the bracket on it. Now, it's kind of hard to say why, but just this boat seemed to stretch out a little bit and the boat looked a lot happier with the added length. I mean, something about it, it definitely looked nicer. We started out underway to get to the spot where we did the original test and started right out to shoot with our Holeshot test. Now, our before test showed this boat took about just over 7 seconds to plane, and with the new bracket installed, we were right at about 5 seconds to plane. Taking 2 seconds off the Holeshot was really a noticeable improvement, and more importantly, one of the things that I noticed too was the added flotation from the bracket. These engines went nowhere near the water. Before, the engines were half underwater when we took off, and again when we slowed down, and this phenomenon was completely gone with the addition of the bracket. This was a noticeable improvement. Our next test was what's the minimum speed we could run the boat at and stay on plane. Now, before Scott added the bracket to this boat, the boat needed 23.5 miles an hour to get up on plane at 2,900 RPMs. With the addition of the bracket, the speed number dropped to 21.75 miles an hour at 2,800 RPMs. And the fuel numbers at both of these levels were virtually unchanged. But the ability to plane at a slower speed is going to enable you to get from A to B a lot more comfortably on a rough day without the boat wanting to hunt for a high-speed RPM. Now, once again, as in the before, we tested the boat at 3 different very common cruising RPMs. We noticed both an improvement of speed and fuel economy across the board at all 3 of these ranges, with the most noticeable being at 4,000 RPMs, where the before numbers showed us 36.8 miles per hour at 1.37 miles a gallon. And the after numbers showing us an improvement to 38.1 miles an hour and 1.56 miles per gallon. Now, is it a really dramatic change in all these numbers? Not necessarily, but the numbers are definitely there and they don't lie, okay? You're gonna see better fuel economy and better performance from a math standpoint. How much money are you gonna spend at the pump? The guy that owns this boat that did the conversion is definitely going to realize some savings. But more importantly to me, the changes that I noticed in the boat were this boat handled infinitely better with the bracket. Now, when I say infinitely better, this is going to be something that's hard for me to quantify to you other than the fact that it's just the feel of the boat. The boat floated higher in the water. The stern end of the boat didn't squat. The engines never went in the water, but just overall, the boat to me felt happier having this bracket on there. It was much more maneuverable. It was much easier to handle at the dock. It was much more maneuverable in close quarters. The boat backed better. It went forward better. It did figure 8s and turns better. Just overall, a better performing boat. When I was finished with the boat, I absolutely think Scott got his money's worth.
I noticed it's way more responsive. The steering is more responsive. The boat reacts faster. It planes off faster. I think it rides a little bit more level, and it's burning less fuel. And easy to get on and off. The other boat, the motors were on the transom. It was very hard to get on the back of the boat. Now we have the dive ladder, which is right off the side of the bracket here, and it makes it much easier to get on and off the boat. It was well worth the investment, and the boat runs better, and thumbs up. Awesome.
At the end of our test, I was glad I had the opportunity to do a real before and after comparison of this boat. Now, is a bracket going to be the silver bullet fix-all for every single boat out there? Maybe not, but for this Regulator, I know Scott was really happy, and he's quickly going to realize that his investment was not in vain. This boat just ran better, and he knows it.
When we return, Florida Sportsman boating editor George LaBonte sits down with Brian O'Donnell, owner of Marine Customs Unlimited, to revisit some of the most memorable MCU builds from this season of Project Dreamboat. This segment brought to you by Infinity by Harman. It's all about the music. At Marine Customs Unlimited, our professionally trained staff is committed to making all your boating dreams come true while providing unmatched attention to detail and quality. Specializing in custom boat building and modifications, fiberglass and gel coat repairs, insurance claims, upholstery and canvas work, custom dash panels, Yamaha outboard sales and service, and more. Marine Customs Unlimited. You dream it, we build it. Welcome back to Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat. Join us as George LaBonte joins Brian O'Donnell to revisit some of the most memorable MCU builds from this season of Project Dreamboat.
Well, Brian, here we are again, another year in the books, man, and I'm telling you what, it seems like it's been a long one. It's been a really good one, though. That contender really generated a lot of interest and a lot of comments to me, emails and everything, and, you know, everybody's been saying, when's the contender splash? When's the contender splash? Well, you know, we've seen it now, but I saw the boat at the boat ramp going in the water when you guys put it in there to test run it, and that paint job on that boat was sick, man. I mean, I'm talking about, I had to do a 360 around the whole trailer. It really came out nice.
Yeah, so the owner of that boat, Harold Paris, he came in here, initially called me about leaky fuel tanks in his boat. Next thing you know, the hurricanes happened, the boat came up here, it had a couple scratches and dings and dents, and he made the executive decision to go ahead and spend some bucks, and he said, you know what, I'm ready for those new Yamahas. I said, if you're gonna do those 300 Yamahas and you're thinking about painting this boat, now's the time to do it. All Grip has this new metallic paint. I explained to him, it's gonna just set the boat off, and the boat just really came out like a 10.
Now, I noticed on the reveal part of the show that the owner seemed to go really crazy about that dash panel. How about that?
Not only did we build a full panel, but we bent it in 2 areas, so it formed to the complete dash area. We took this new Infinity radio and we incorporated it from the back, even though it's not designed for it. Not to mention, when he looked up forward a little bit, he didn't just see the Infinity head unit, he saw those new Infinity speakers. And let me tell you, that was another cool part of the project.
Listen, at the end of the day, he wanted a boat that looked like new. He got one that looked like it was better than new.
Yeah, no, it was, and that's what I mean. Harold was awesome to deal with throughout the whole project. He gave me a lot of leeway and a lot of space to do my own thing, and I was able to really lay it out onto this boat. And I think at the end of the day, I hit it out of the park because he was super excited at that reveal.
You know, another boat that really generated a lot of interest to me, and it looked kind of like a little brother to the contender, was that Paramount. That guy was really looking for some speed. I mean, the motor had everybody talking.
It's a little different project than the contender. I mean, this was a complete rehab. This was a major refit, major structural work, stringers. We cut the cap down. But yeah, that boat was a major renovation.
Whose idea was it to cut that cap down? I mean, you basically changed the look of that boat. I mean, nobody probably would even be able to tell what kind of a boat it was now with that new look on that shear line.
So it actually originated from Steve telling me that it would look really cool, and it just brought it into a new era, and the boat looked super sharp when we got it trimmed out.
You know, the metallic paint again on this boat, is this going to be something we see? Is this like a trend starting here in the future? Tell me about that, and also a bunch of other stuff on the boat. You really dressed this thing up nice.
Sometimes a customer sees a boat coming out of my spray booth and they see it, they gotta have it. And that was kind of what happened with Steve. He came up with the idea of going with the stone gray. The boat just came together. The taco rub rail with the stainless insert with the lights up in the bow, they looked incredible. We customized this console and we built it to where you'd be able to put a little angle cooler up there, be able to remove the cooler, use those custom angle brackets that strap the cooler down to strap down a live well when he goes fishing with his buddies. Not to mention the fishability of this boat with those power poles on the back. We were able to drop the boat, the bow stays in one direction. He loved the location of the Bennett trim tab switch. Being able to control this boat with that big motor on the back, not to mention the stereo system in this thing. The location of the speaker pods and how we position them to go up to the forward part of the console, those Infinity speakers, not only look awesome, they sound great.
Okay, let's roll it back here. You got a cool looking boat that turns heads at the sandbar, goes 70 miles an hour plus, fishes. I mean, he's got everything he wants in the boat, obviously.
George's no doubt. The boat looked awesome, sounded awesome. It was a great project.
Okay, now on the other side of the spectrum here, not all boats are gigantic, big project type of boats. You know, I'm thinking about Ron Wagner and that Craft. Incidentally, this guy is a legend, old guard guy down in the Keys. And this boat was not a super fancy boat, but it turned into a big job. Tell me a little bit about the Craft.
He buys the boat, he gets it home, he's cleaning it up, and he's got the smell of fuel in it. Go figure, it's got a rotten fuel tank. Now you wouldn't expect that or think it in this later model boat, but let me tell you, the way they constructed and put this thing together, that's what caused this problem that they had with the fuel tank. I couldn't believe the things I found as we cut this boat up. They never put limber holes in the stringers. This thing just filled up with water from moisture and the rain and all the other things washing the boat down, and the water had nowhere to go. So it literally was rotting away, just sitting there. And being a real simple build and not a whole lot of things going on with it, it was still a major project.
Okay, now this guy's going to use this boat down in the Keys. I mean, he's been a guide in the Keys forever, and he's going to use it as a guide boat. So anything special you needed to do to make that work for him?
I had no idea. I've built a lot of boats for people. I've never been asked to make one live well a dark reddish brown color and another one a blue color. And apparently the baits adapt to the colors, and depending on where you're fishing, you want the baits to have a deeper color. But these are the tricks you learn after guiding over 50-something years, especially down in the Florida Keys. Ron called me up after receiving the boat. He had only had it for 3 or 4 weeks, and he said, "Brian, I hate this chair in the boat." He told me he wanted a cooler at his seat, not under the seat. I reached out to my friends over at Angle Coolers. They had me this custom cooler all set up with a C-deck pad so Ron could sit on it, and I built him this really neat PVC extruded box that we painted with all grip, and it's actually a tackle drawer that he could slide out and put all types of storage of tackle and other odd ends. It really came out nice, and it was really functional for him.
Brian, as a guide, I understand, what Ron was going for, and guys are particular. I mean, everybody's got a little bit different idea what the perfect boat is for them. My idea is not going to work for him necessarily, and his not for me. But, at the end of the day, I think Ron got exactly what he was looking for with this boat.
When we come back, George LaBonte joins Brian O'Donnell to discuss their favorite one-man dreamboat builds from this season of Project Dreamboat. This segment brought to you by Armstrong. Experience the Armstrong Advantage.
Do you have the Armstrong Advantage? In its most basic form, an Armstrong outboard bracket improves the efficiency of your outboard motor. This equates to a faster time to plane and higher top speeds. The list of advantages continue with improved maneuverability, added space, and a quieter ride. Adding a swim platform accompanied by an Armstrong boarding ladder will certainly add to your day out on the water. Isn't it time for you to gain the Armstrong Advantage?
Welcome back to Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat. Join us as George LaBonte joins Brian O'Donnell to discuss their favorite one-man dreamboat builds from this season of Project Dreamboat.
You know what? We actually put together some great stories, I think. I mean, one of the things that I enjoyed about the season was trying to find the human side of the story, and tie that together with the build. And I think we really succeeded with that this year. Starting with the Whaler, for example, the very first show of the season. The Boston Whaler, now this is Alan Black. This guy's a sport fish captain from Stewart who grew up in Walker's Key in the Bahamas. And for anybody that's ever been to Walker's, you've ridden on the Love Train, that was a 25 Whaler. For him, the significance here was he worked for a guy running a private boat, and that gentleman, he was fighting a battle with cancer, and he went 8 years, and the guy at the end of his life decided to give Alan this boat so he'd have a boat to take his own son fishing on, but he had his work cut out for him. He built this boat so he could deep drop and fish for swords. He needed to put a transducer, which on a whaler, can be problematic. I mean, you've seen how this boat is made of foam. Well, he had to route out a spot into the hull, cut a piece of that foam out, and dried in this transducer into the bottom of the boat so he could read in those extreme depths. Some other things, I mean, Alan does a lot of trolling, and in the tropical heat, I might add. He put a great big, really nice hardtop on the boat, added the taco riggers to it, for trolling. A lot of nice custom touches for his fishing needs. The boat is called the Xephos, the Greek word for this double-edged sword. And having a gift of a boat, the boat being given to you, was kind of a curse and a blessing at the same time. That's where he came up with the name, but he'll be able to enjoy the boat for a long time with his family.
All right, George. So one of the boats that really caught my attention, and it has to do with my need for speed, was a boat those guys built, the Scandi White. They were actually out of Daytona Beach. They owned a race team. Tell me about that boat.
Yeah, you know what? That was a really cool story, and that one just kind of fell in my lap. This story started years ago when Todd and his brother were younger. When they were kids, actually, their uncle had this boat, okay? It was just a straight-up old John boat, but those guys loved that boat, and their uncle used to take them out on it. The boat sat and sat, and it really fell apart and ended up filling up with water, and it was in the uncle's yard. And finally, as adults, they were able to talk their uncle out of the boat. Okay, now fast forward into their life as adults, these guys have a Daytona race team, Spirit of Daytona. I mean, they had the fabricating shop to do all the custom metal work on this boat, powder coating, and basically they took an old wrecked John boat and really went all the way with the boat. Having the ability to use all those assets and tools at the race shop made a huge difference. This boat was really tricked out.
The one that got me this year was the Dustin Tool tribute boat. I mean, that thing was pretty incredible. I mean, that was over the top. I mean, I don't care what anyone says. The audience, all the people that watch this show, I knew that drew some tears.
You know, that story, it really was special to me and the Toole family, as I said. I mean, they're just great people, and, you know, really tragic the way this boat came about, but, you know, what a way to honor his son. And the story is, his son originally bought this boat, and he had plans to make this boat a nicer boat, but unfortunately, you know, it just didn't end up that way, and he was taken too soon. And I think Jeff and his sons, you know, really had their heart in the right place when they started the thing, and it just escalated into something way bigger. You know, they were really able to incorporate a lot of personal touches, you know, to honor the memory of Dustin here, and, you know, the finish work and stuff on the boat really reflects that. And I know Jeff and Dalton said that they feel Dustin's presence every time they get on the boat. In fact, Dalton said that if Dustin could see this boat, he'd fall out if he saw what they did. I'm really gonna have to agree with him on that.
So tell me about that other boat the guide had down in the Keys.
Gary Strohbeck is a guy who grew up in the Keys, and his dad, Skip Paxton, is one of the old guard, just like the guy with the coup de craft, legendary old-time guy who's been there guiding since the 60s, all right? Skip was friends with Willie Roberts. This was a 1972 Willie Roberts boat that, very similar to the boat that Skip's guided on for 50 years, a boat that Gary, as he was growing up, admired from a distance for a long time and always dreamed about having a boat like that, or even that boat one day. Well, as an adult, the opportunity to get this boat comes his way, and he decides, I'm gonna take this thing and do a hull-up restoration, and I'm gonna use this for my own guide boat. I mean, I'm sure this boat looked way better when he got done with it than it did the day it left Willie's shop. And it had the ride of a 72 Willie with all the modern technology incorporated into it. The last boat we're going to talk about here today is the Tongzi, the dumpster boat, okay? This guy is a person who has no knowledge of boats or boat building in any way, zero experience. Only boat he'd ever been on was he had a Zodiac that he took on a trip to the Keys, and once he did that, he and his wife decided they wanted a boat that they could go to the Keys and take vacations on. And here comes this boat next to a dumpster, and with no knowledge of boat building, the guy loads this thing on a trailer and takes it to his house and starts diving into this nightmare of a project, all right? He could transform the boat bit by bit from watching YouTube videos and going on boat forums and just talking to people. When we met him down in Palm Beach and I saw the boat for the first time, I couldn't believe this guy built this thing. He really demonstrates to the world too that, you know, you can put your mind to something and do it. You know, he said to us the very first time he put the boat in water, now, and he said the boat jumped off the trailer, and to him it actually felt like the boat missed the water. You know, like he felt really a sense of pride that he brought this thing back to where it belonged. I mean, it was really a really cool story.